I like the headphones because it locks you in.
Yeah,
you know,
I agree.
you actually kind of, yeah. If you need more water, we need a bathroom break or anything like that, let me know. But it is rolling. I like to cover it because I stare at the time sometimes of how long we've been going. All right, Jacob, you want to say who you are, a little bit of your background and stuff like that?
Yeah, so my name is Jacob VanderRoest. I'm 23 years old. I live in Fort Collins, Colorado. I just finished my first year of graduate school in the chemistry department at CSU. And I'm originally from Southwest Michigan, is where I came from. So I've been living in Colorado for about just shy of a year. Moved in last July.
Mm-hmm. I did a Google search of you, and I didn't know that you were on the CSU page, and that you were originally that you got your bachelor's from Hope University.
I did, yeah, Hope College. Yeah.
Yeah. How was that at Hope?
Yeah, Hope was looking back, it's a really good institution. It's really small. It's like 3,500 students.
Okay.
And so I studied chemistry is what I majored in. Got a minor in geology. Ran cross country and track. And then also was really involved in our Hope Advocates for Sustainability, which is like our eco-friendly student group on campus.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And before that, like, we could start from the very beginning if you want. Like, what was like growing up, elementary, middle, and high school like for you?
Yeah, so I grew up for 22 years I lived in Southwest Michigan and grew up in this town called South Haven, which is right on the coast of Michigan, or right on the coast of Lake Michigan, excuse me. And yes, stayed there pretty much from when I was born until I left for college, and my college was only 40 minutes away from my hometown, so it was all pretty consolidated in the same geographical location. Went to elementary school and middle school in South Haven, and then transferred to Saugatuck in high school. And really enjoyed my time at Saugatuck High School. That's where I really fell in love with running, with cross country and track, and made a lot of good friends in that area too. So growing up, my life was pretty consolidated within just kind of the confines of not the confines, that's a weird way to put it, but within the central location of Southwest Michigan. That's where kind of my entire life was oriented, right in that little area.
Is that more of a smaller like kind of town?
Yeah, it's
area, like population wise.
Yeah, it's probably maybe like a fifth or so of Fort Collins. So not super tiny, but definitely not like a larger area like this.
Like I kind of identify with that. My graduating high school class was 30 kids.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine was about like I think it was 82, and that was the largest class that moved through Saugatuck.
Okay. So. Yeah. So
wow, I can't imagine 30 people.
I have small town vibes as well, I guess you could say, Yeah, there's guys I try to keep in touch to this day that I knew since like kindergarten or maybe first grade at the earliest, which is weird, I guess, but not a lot of people, I guess, get that, because high school's in like an urban setting. You kind of jump around a bit and people move and stuff like that. But yeah, I still know people, like at least through social media, that after high school they went to military or college and still kind of peep in on their lives still, and I've known them since, man, one of my friends, our mothers were basically like pregnant around the same times and stuff like that. So it's weird, like coming from a small town and then knowing all those people and still having loose connections, But you're a cross country athlete in high school?
I ran cross country and track competitively in high school as well as college.
Okay. Nice.
Before COVID kind of threw a wrench in everything athletic, everything in college, but
because we met climbing. Yeah,
absolutely.
And when did you get into that?
Yeah, I got into climbing about a month after I moved to Colorado. Okay. So I've been climbing for about maybe 10 months now.
Okay.
And I moved here, went to a couple climbing gyms, and then just fell in love with the sport of climbing. And yeah, it's been probably one of my favorite new things that I've been working on since coming to grad.
Because you're just climbing today, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Where were you climbing at?
I was climbing at a crag. It's called the Crags at Estes Park.
Okay.
And we were at a crag called Wizard Gate. We were doing some sport climbing up there. Just a gorgeous day. Temperature was like 60 degrees and sunny. It was just a perfect day for climbing.
Yeah. What are the routes like up there? What's the type of terrain and stuff like that?
Yeah, so it's all granitic and gneissic rock, so igneous and metamorphic, and really, really good rock. And most of the time you're in the shade, so it keeps the rock nice and cool, so you have a little bit better friction on the rubber of your shoes. And good mix of sport and trad climbing. because right now I'm just kind of just doing sport climbing, so it's nice to have a lot of options there. And a good spread of grades from like the 5.7 up to 5.12 and 5.13. So there's kind of something for everyone.
Yeah.
And we were only there just at one crag for just half a day too.
Yeah.
So there's so much more to explore, but really nice.
Nice. That's awesome. I've only gone outside maybe once. I'm
mostly
been in the gym, but I also mostly boulder.
Yeah.
It's a little,
Yeah.
they're basically the same in the sense that you just need to get outside to do it, I don't know. I like that it's always a place I can go to, like traveling, trying to figure stuff. Maybe people have taken up routes and stuff like that. And also I just don't know much about finding these locations and stuff like that, So just the gym is always like, I like things that are guarantees, because like yesterday I had a 10-hour shift at work and then I'm like, I just need to climb or do something. So
you know exactly where it is.
Know exactly what to do.
Time.
Yeah.
That's true.
Reset today. So there's new stuff on the walls and stuff like that. So it's always nice looking forward to that.
Are you primarily going to the CSU Rec Center?
Yeah. I go a couple times to Ascent and I've gone to Whetstone a few, but my membership's at CSU and I get my fill there, it's smaller, but I mean, I think I have 2 or 3 routes I've made up right now just for fun because you get bored. And I kind of like making up routes, I see like a move or a different technical way to combine 2 holds, and then you can kind of, you just have to string a couple other moves to it. And then you have a route at that point, and usually I'm like 3-4 hours into a session, so I'm burnt out and I think it's hard, and then I come back and it's pretty easy when I get into it, so then you make it harder.
I get probably the lack of set routes probably breeds that creativity too. That's cool. That's cool, especially when like maybe I'm projecting a 5 and then you get tired out and you can't really project it anymore. Just do a couple else. 4s maybe, but then you're done. But me, I'm a little crazy, so I'm not done. So I just want to keep climbing things. And so I'll make up shit. I'll try to figure out a dyno off of a 0 to a 7 or some stupid stuff, But I saw you had a TED Talk too, dude, online. That's sweet. Yeah, I've given a TED Talk.
One thing I learned, it's weird how much you can figure out about somebody just with a quick Google search.
Yeah.
Like I didn't try to deep dive on you too hard. And then I was like, oh, you have... What is your affiliation with CSU? Because you have a particular title, right? With sustainability?
Yeah, so I'm the director of the graduate student chapter of the Student Sustainability Center.
Yeah. And that was like the first thing that popped up.
Oh, wow.
It was like first or second. I was like,
that's funny.
This is great. Like I didn't know that about you. You know? I thought you were just a fun climber dude, but you've got all these other cool credentials behind you. Yeah. Can you speak a little more on that?
Yeah, totally.
And like why you chose that, I guess?
Totally. So that's a really good question. So during probably my sophomore year of college is when I really started getting into environmental sustainability, and that became a lot more important to me. One, because I find it very fulfilling. And then 2, the motivation for environmental sustainability is just kind of like we're looking at how we use water and get our energy, and it's always striving to how can we make these systems better? How can we improve these systems? And for me, just kind of on a personal scale, like really being intentional about personal growth is something really important to me. And so I really like that the idea of environmental sustainability, they take that approach that I use on a kind of a microscopic scale in my life and put it on a societal macroscopic scale. And so I kind of like that ever increasing stride for improvement. And so I saw like a flyer at Hope College that they're putting on TEDx Hope College event. And they had a thing that you could sign up to be a volunteer there, and I emailed them. I was like, I don't want to be a volunteer, but I want to give it I want to give a TED Talk really bad. And so like I applied for it and gave like a 5-minute brief talk on what I was going to talk about. And unfortunately, I was the got accepted to do it. And that was the first year Hope College put on a TEDx event, and I was the first speaker of the first TEDx Hope College talk, which was really fun. And might be paraphrasing it, but the title of the talk was How Diet Can Combat the Climate Crisis, I think. And so I focus on how, what we choose to eat on a daily basis has a lot of environmental impacts and I proposed a couple strategies we can do to try to, consume food that's a little bit more environmentally friendly and a little less resource dependent. And so then when I was making my decision to come to graduate school, I was really kind of still had that sustainability focus. And I knew that was something that's very prevalent at Colorado State University's campus with the School of Global and Environmental Sustainability. They have an entire school devoted towards sustainability. And so I really wanted to get involved with that. And so I started talking to the people that work there, and they said that there's kind of, for graduate students, involvement is kind of limited to very specific programs they have to apply to and things that, you can't do until you're, a third or fourth year in your PhD program. And so I kind of wanted to start something that any graduate student, regardless if they're a master's student, if they're a PhD student, regardless if they've been a PhD student for 1 year or 7 years, that they could hop on and try to get involved in. And so that's kind of the reason why I got involved with the School of Global and Environmental Sustainability at CSU.
Yeah. Yeah. Was there multiple speakers when you did that TED event, or was it just you?
Yeah, there was 10 total speakers.
And you were the first to come up? Nice.
Yep.
How'd that feel to be the first spearhead of the whole thing?
It was wicked. I was really excited and very nervous. I had done like musicals and stuff like that in high school. And so it's funny to kind of have that energy back. And I knew I was the first person to go. And so you want to make sure you go out there and do a good job and, not bomb as the first speaker of this event, kind of set the mood in a bad way. And so I practiced that TED Talk so much. It was, I got close contacted for like a COVID-19 case. So I got sent back home to my house. And so I was at my home for like the weeks leading up to it. And so I just practiced that in the mirror just every single day. And so I went up and I was super stoked and super focused and ready. And my presentation is very slide dependent because I put up a lot of, results of different studies and a lot of information. And so when I went to use the clicker to change the first slide, I was like, and as you can see in this graph, and the clicker didn't work, and my heart just sunk. And so what would happen is, for some reason, the clicker wasn't working. And so the people backstage, they could, see me through the cameras and stuff. And so I would just be very obvious with my motion of like, and, on this slide, and then they could go back there and change the slide. And so we had a couple technical difficulties.
Yeah.
But they did an excellent job of editing those out in the video. So the video is pretty smooth and pretty flawless. So I went backstage and was a little upset that we encountered some technical difficulties, but everything that I could have controlled, I think I did a good job in. Yeah. And that was, that was a real, probably one of my favorite things I did in college. It was a very, very cool experience.
Do you think that was a turning point for you, like within yourself personally, like having that event? Like, do you think that kind of shaped you or pivoted you a little bit?
That's a really good question. I think it was the culmination of a lot of different things I did in college, kind of in one instance.
Okay.
So kind of my development on being interested in sustainability and specifically how diet can affect that. So there was that aspect. And there was also, in college, I tried to be a little bit more of an extroverted person, kind of ironically, once the pandemic hit and we were kind of coming back to school, like just that much introversion was just not healthy for me. And so it was a really cool moment to kind of blossom out of the pandemic and do something like this that had to do a lot of work to prepare for. And there were a lot of high stakes with it. Because you're in a very public setting and you could mess up and everyone's going to see it. And, but I find with the kind of personality I have, it's those kinds of things I find most fulfilling and the most genuinely fun. Whether that be, like rock climbing, like there are consequences to that and like playing guitar and stuff, like things can go wrong and it can turn into a bad situation. But if they don't, it's super fun. I think it's that kind of payoff that really helped. And I think the TED Talk kind of helped seal that kind of perspective that I have on things that I try to pursue, try to do things that are kind of difficult at first, but then they're super really fun when it pays off.
Yeah. Yeah. So almost just the act of putting yourself out there kind of shaped you and made you a little different. What about when you were pursuing this information? When you're putting together all the statistics and the slides and how to present it and everything like that, did that kind of change you, or did you already kind of know this would be a topic I would do if I had a stage? Or what was that like for you?
Yeah, so I definitely knew I wanted to talk about it, but the real main difficulty was how to present this information. Because it can be challenging to try to encourage people to make different lifestyle alterations. And so I really tried to be careful about how I presented it, because it is something I'm really passionate about and is really important, with especially just like water scarcity and resource scarcity that we have going on in the United States. Like, it was something I wanted to make sure that people understood the weight of the situation, the importance of the problem, but without being too much of like a downer. And then also, try not to use it as like a soapbox moment where you could, and so that was kind of difficult. So that was probably the hardest part, was trying to, how do I want to craft this story and how to encourage people to make these lifestyle alterations without coming across as like really pretentious or perhaps ignorant or arrogant.
Yeah. The other two words that come to mind for me, not for you, but like in general, when you kind of get into these topics that maybe some people use against it, is alarmism. And also that kind of world ending kind of critique
fearmongering.
People. Fearmongering that people, those are the two things that I think maybe can hinder the movement sometimes for me personally, because there's very few times I feel like teaching or doing anything from a place of fear is a good place to start, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that with like the movement as a whole, where I don't know, like the alarmism there's a need for urgency, but to give people anxiety about things, I that's a little bit harder for me to get behind, I guess, So I don't know if you have thoughts on that with the whole idea of climate in general. And if you don't, that's okay. But if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a really good thing.
Because what I liked about your talk was it was very almost grounded in a good sense. Like it's just like, it's not even like change your diet necessarily. It's just one day out of 7. Stop doing this one thing, right? Which is, to me, very approachable. A lot of people, like I have friends that are vegetarians and they don't push it on me, but they're like completely cut out. It's hard for me because I really enjoy meat personally, and so it's hard for me to, I guess, wrap my head around 100% none of that. But listening to that, it's like, okay, I could definitely see myself a lot more doing one day a week, or anything like that. Like it's much more approachable, and it's easier to wrap your head around, especially because you need everybody to kind of get behind these different new ventures that we're trying to put in place, right? And that's one thing I really liked, because I did watch the video. I really liked that about it, where it wasn't like, it wasn't like anything over the top, but it's still something that makes a change and also is very approachable and, I don't know, easy solutions that everybody can do is probably one of the best tacks to probably take, right? So I like that about it. And it kind of, maybe it's just the, I don't know, media getting a hold of it and wanting to make it a dramatic thing, that it kind of overblows that, right? And when you actually just talk to regular people, they actually have real solutions that aren't crazy, right? So maybe that plays into it. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on like the broad scale of this whole thing, because your approach was a lot more reasonable, which is what we need.
And I appreciate you saying that. I'm glad that came across in the talk. One of the biggest things I advocate for a more plant-centered diet. It's kind of the idea behind the TED Talk. And unfortunately, a lot of the perspective of that is kind of this all or nothing approach. It's either you're a complete vegan or you're, not. And the idea of if you could not eat meat for one meal of the day or like 1 week of the day, just kind of like start there and see if it works for your lifestyle. Because from personal experience, that's what I did. And it grew from there, but you just got to start somewhere small. Another thing really that I always try to keep in mind too is, at least when I was living in Michigan, like I didn't live in a food desert. There was a lot of, readily available fresh fruits and vegetables, which is really good. And just try to keep perspective that, and sometimes other people have things going on in their lives that are just way more important than, what I'm talking about, at least in like, like the short term and such. And that's one thing that I always try to keep in mind when I talk about this topic of plant-based foods, of like, I'm very fortunate, where that's something that I have the bandwidth and the energy to put towards and try to deliberately shift, where other people, they might just have too much going on. Like this is something that can be on the back burner and be addressed later, which I mean, I understand that too.
Yeah. There's that whole idea that I don't think gets enough credit, is people care a lot more about climate when they're raised out of poverty. Have you heard of that idea much?
No.
Well, because when you're just trying to bare minimum get by, you'll do any means to get by, right? You'll burn dung, you'll burn cardboard, you'll burn wood to heat your house, right? But when you actually get to a place where you can worry about different things that are reusable or anything like that, but like when every day is, and it doesn't even have to be every day, but when it's more of a struggle just to get by in life, you'll do anything, and those habits can lead to more carbon emissions or anything like that, right? And they're not concerned with it necessarily because, like you said, life is a lot more of a challenge than the climate thing. It's hard to wrap your head around that when you're trying to eat that day, right? So getting people out of that level helps them kind of have a easier time investing in these ideas, right? And I don't think that gets enough talked about, because it's like, if you took that pursuit, you'd be attempting to solve poverty, but then also more people would be able to get involved in solving climate, right? And I don't know. I don't hear that get enough airtime maybe, but I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
So you're saying that people generally who are in poverty care more or less on average about...
Less about climate.
Less about climatic issues. Yeah, I can see that in terms of... like how you just explained, the problems that they're dealing with are very different than someone like me from the upper middle class of Southwest Michigan. Yeah, and so that makes.
And it's almost like long-term issues you're talking. Yeah, when they have short-term, day-to-day, week-to-week,
more immediate,
immediate,
which
issues.
Are completely legitimate.
Exactly, and so being able to free up the mental space to get out of those, they can more think about what it looks like in decades, or like you said, it was like 6 days and 200 something. No, 6 years and 200 something.
Oh yeah,
days
the countdown
with the countdown.
Yeah, increasing the
and so
2 degrees Celsius.
You may be just worrying about 1 year instead of the 6 year, like that timeline. Like your whole mental shifts in a sense of what is an issue at that point. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I really thought it was interesting when you talked about sustainability as a whole in your pursuit as like a career, and then how that reflects to you being better as an individual. Yeah. Can you talk more about that? That interests me.
Yeah, totally. So sometimes it comes as a detriment of just kind of really focusing on just maybe being just like overtly reflective on what you're doing. Is it fulfilling? Are you satisfied with what you're doing? And that's been something that's been much more on my mind over the past couple of years, kind of since the pandemic. And I could like kind of take the time to sit down and think about what I was actually doing, and is that fulfilling, and do I enjoy this? And so, yeah, for me, I'm incredibly goal oriented. I try to, like, every single week I make my week to-do list where I know what I'm going to do on every single day. And then I try to make goals for each summer, and then like each semester and over the next decade, just try to identify those things. And I feel like sustainability also tries to tap into that. So the United Nations, they have like 17 sustainable goals that they're trying to work towards. And they're all just super, super ambitious, like end poverty, like just huge ideas that I really respect, where you shoot for these seemingly unattainable goals, but it's like if as long as we go in that right direction. And so I found that really kind of spoke to how I try to approach things on a more personal basis of trying to set ambitious goals for yourself and get after it.
Do you know the book? I don't want to butcher the title, but I think it's $75 billion to save the world.
No,
I think that's it. That. But I know it's by Bjorn Lomborg. I might have butchered that name, but what he did was he put together I think it's above 200, all of the UN goals in general, and then he got top-notch economic experts to do a price analysis of like every dollar spent on like child nutrition, what is the yield back, and that's one of the higher ones of return on investment, so to speak. So he did a whole economic breakdown of those things, which is a very smart approach, right? Because in an investing sense, if you get $2 on every dollar, then it's a lot easier to maybe get donors involved, and also more entrepreneurial and different more maybe business people involved because they
Mm-hmm.
actually can see a price breakdown, which is more their language, right?
Sure.
And I really liked that because we hear I don't know, the emotional argument, which there's a place for, but that we also need that just rationale of like, where do we put $5,000 for the greatest yield, right? And so like it makes sense that maybe nutrition is one of them, because then brains don't underdevelop, and then you could actually have more people that can also aid in a cause or just be productive members in society, right? So that's a really good book. I think it's on my bookshelf either here or back at home.
Wow.
But it's a really good read. I'd recommend it. And then he puts in essays from different economic guys, and they made their own lists of what they personally thought was better, and then like group lists and stuff like that. It's really cool to read. I don't know where I was going with that, but it's a really interesting read because you don't see an economic breakdown of like solving poverty, you know, in a sense of like every dollar gives you back 3 or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that's more like just clear cut, you know, where it's like we get a 3x return on our investment and people are getting more nutrition. Like let's
it seems like a good idea.
Put some legs behind this. So let's get behind it, right?
Yeah.
Why diet for you? Like sustainability, yes, but why diet?
The thing I like about it is it's super tangible. I think I might have said something like this in the TED Talk where like, you know, you can get new solar panels, you can drive a Tesla, but I mean, not everyone is going to be able to do that. Versus diet, it's something that you make on a daily basis every few hours. You deliberately decide what am I going to eat today. And so I like that approach because it's something that everyone can relate to. And then seemingly everyone could have the potential to participate in that kind of strategy from an ecological sustainability perspective. And so, that really spoke to me. And then also, it was something that I had started doing during the sophomore year of college. And so that's when I kind of started pivoting towards more plant-based diet. And then so I've been doing it for a few years. And so when this TED Talk opportunity popped up, I knew like this is something that's recent, that's kind of personal that I can talk to. I can extrapolate it on a larger scale with, global climate, but also talk on a personal level. So I thought it touched on a lot of different facets from an individual level all the way up to kind of like this global scale. So initially it was all for ecological reasons. Plant-based diets, as I explained, they emit less carbon dioxide during their production, they require less water, which is pretty beneficial. But then there's also the health aspects of plant-based diets that I think are pretty convincing. And then also the, animal ethics, which is often really driven by PETA, who really doesn't have the best rep amongst most people. But there's different ways that you can come at it. And I felt like, talking about diet from a more ecological point would be something kind of maybe a little bit different that most people haven't considered too.
Do you think, and you acknowledge it, which is great, but do you think it kind of hinders the idea where there's only a certain percentage of the world that could get behind this just based on availability of foods in their environment? So do you think that kind of, like, it's good for first world countries to get behind it, but I don't know what percentage of the world is first world these days, right? But it's not 100% of the world. At the very, I don't know if is it majority? Do you know? I don't know what the numbers are on that, but
can't speak on that.
Hopefully more people are getting raised out of poverty, but at the same time, there's still people that don't have those options. So do you think that kind of puts like a little bit of a wrench in the whole idea, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, and that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is people who, are in more poverty-stricken situations in areas like they have other more important problems to tend to in the immediate, immediately. And so, I think it can't speak to everyone, but I feel like the kind of target audience was just kind of like the average person in the United States. And I feel like in most cases, something like that would be the most applicable topic to discuss within the realm of sustainability for probably the average person in the U.S.
Are you keyed into the carnivore diet types?
I have heard about like the keto diets and that kind of stuff.
Keto, but then also carnivore, which is 100% meat in a diet. Have you seen much of that?
I have not seen much of that. No.
I don't know if it's on the come up right now, but I'm very interested in diet, nutrition, and fitness just from a personal standpoint. So I'm always observing these different things, and I've tried keto and different things like that for brief bits.
And just so I understand correctly, keto is kind of like a low carb diet, right?
Very low carb.
Don't eat carbs. It puts your body in ketosis, and so that you
burn fat
a lot more efficiently.
Yeah,
okay.
Ketosis is burning fat.
Yes,
when your body's in that. But then carnivore kind of takes that to the next step, where keto, you would still have some vegetables involved, and you'd still have some fats involved. It's mostly protein and fat gets increased within that diet.
The keto diet, gotcha.
But then carnivore is just 100% all meat. There's one alternative version where some carbohydrates are supplemented through fruits, because you see a slight decrease in like athletic ability with the carnivore diet, just because you don't have that. Like for a marathon runner, it wouldn't be for most people. It wouldn't be good.
You don't have the glycogen stores.
Yeah. So some people have a alternative where it's like 90-95% meat, but then there's that 10% of fruits. I keep saying vegetables. Fruits that can kind of supplement. I don't know if you're keyed into that kind of.
So that's eating 90% of the food that you eat on a daily basis is meat.
Wow. Yeah.
I have not heard of. Yeah, I've not heard of, like, I've heard of the keto diet and these kinds of things more towards more animal products, but I've not heard of the carnivore diet where it's almost entirely all meat. That's interesting. Wow.
Like there's somebody I follow online, and they're a big hunter type, and so they're eating a lot of game they already shot and stuff like that. So it was a very high quality meat.
Oh yeah, totally.
When you do this,
totally.
But they, for a month at least, literally ate all meat. And they would get some weird shits they were talking about and stuff like that, just because it's all protein going through your body.
Fiber intake.
It's like all protein and all animal fats basically. And you can use the fats to burn energy, and your body can burn protein for energy if it really needs to.
Yeah.
So it's possible. And the nutrient density of meat's pretty high, so you do not see too many nutrient deficiencies. But like I observe these things, I'm like, interesting.
Sure.
It might be an extremism. I'm not sure. It probably is with 100%, maybe some vegetable or some fruits are a good supplement to get some carbohydrates in, and you kind of get other minerals within taking other fruits. So, I was just curious if you've seen those guys. And
I haven't really looked into it. Like the first thing that popped in my head is, I don't know if you've seen it on like Instagram or Snapchat, or like Liver King, this dude who who just eats a lot of meat and kind of like raw liver and stuff like that. And so I'd say my perception of that community is like that kind of stuff, which is completely skewed, because that's a very, very large, like the average carnivore diet probably doesn't look like Liver King, or is.
He's a dramatic example.
Yeah, exactly. So I haven't really keyed into that community too much, but I'd really like to like chat with someone who's done that and just kind of ask him just kind of like how, just talk to them for just a while, just about like, how do your energy levels compare? Like how's this shift impacted you? Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. 'Cause I like fasting right now. That's been a big thing I really enjoy. I wouldn't say it's for everybody, but for me, it's been great. I'm not super strict with it, but I never eat breakfast.
Okay.
And then my first meal of the day is at the earliest 11.
Okay.
But probably like today I ate around 12.
Wow.
Sometimes it's 1. Today I didn't eat anything and worked out, and then ate around 12 or 1 o'clock.
Sure.
And that's been great because I like to eat a lot of food. I'm pretty active like you are.
Yeah.
So through that you eat a lot of food, but then skipping breakfast. But I also just like that feeling of being full. It's weird. Like maybe a year and a half ago, I was having really bad sleep problems for a couple months, and I didn't know what it was. And then I was like, idiot, you're drinking like half a Nalgene of water right before bed and then wanting to go pee. But I was doing that because I like feeling full. It was a really like
interesting.
It was a really like
is it like
weird thing to stumble upon. It's
feeling?
Very comforting for me. Yeah.
So you just drink some water beforehand, and so that your stomach feels full.
Yeah. And so I was finding that through drinking water, and then I was having a bad sleep because I'd wake up and pee like twice a night. And I was like, why are you drinking a full water bottle before bed? And thinking like, why am I not sleeping well?
Yeah,
Like,
I agree.
So, but connecting all that, like I realized I like that full feeling.
Yep.
And so usually at the end of the day, I have a pretty big dinner. I have like a medium lunch and a pretty big dinner. It's usually after I've worked out, and that's been great. I don't know if that's made me decrease my meat consumption, because I might just re-up on more meat within the two meals. You know, that's one thing I thought about when I thought about like what you proposed, that I was like, if I skipped it on Monday, would I just eat more meat throughout the week and that would just offset it, you know? Like that was my thought, because I'm eating, it helps me maintain my weight, which is nice, but still get in like the fasting part.
Yeah.
And but still, because if I ate breakfast, I'd still probably gorge at the end of the day.
Sure.
And then I don't have like a weight problem, but it was getting a little higher than I personally would like, you know? So skipping breakfast was nice, and I have a little bit bigger dinner. But I was wondering, like, I wonder if my meat even decreased. My calories are a lot more manageable, like just overall. And then I was thinking, if I just skipped a day of meat, would I just kind of offset that with another half chicken breast or a couple of ribs or something like that throughout the week, where would it make even a difference that it's that I'm intending to do if I was to put that into practice? Yeah, I don't know if you have thoughts on.
I think it probably just depends on just your personal habits.
Yeah.
Because I definitely see how if you don't eat breakfast in the morning and you still want to have a good sizable caloric intake, you would eat more in the evening. But I think if someone was to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they didn't eat meat during breakfast, and the idea was just start with something small so you really don't notice the shift too much.
Yeah.
Then the rest of the meals would kind of look about the same.
Yeah.
Versus if someone went cold turkey and just didn't eat any meat, and then they had an opportunity to eat meat again, that's where I could see someone increase the intake because it's something they enjoy to do. But I think if you start kind of with a very small alteration to your daily habits, I don't think that would impact your other daily routine too much.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you looked into fasting at all, or?
I've heard about it a lot. I haven't really looked into it, but I think there's a lot of, again, I'm kind of talking out my ass because I don't know this topic too much, but it doesn't make sense that humans should be kind of full all the time. I think it's really good to feel hungry rather than kind of just an input of food in your system all the time, because then your intestines and your digestive system is always operating, and so I think it's good to not always be eating, which isn't a very controversial statement. But I haven't done much personal look into it, but I've heard that there have been some good benefits to fasting. And so for like what you're doing, would it be considered more like intermittent fasting is the terminology I've heard used?
And it's some people are very strict with it. Me, it's like more, once I've skipped breakfast, sometimes I get like a little bit of a craving like 9-10, and I kind of like it a little bit as like a discipline thing as well. By like especially when I'm at work, like 4 days a week I work, and I'm like, I eat my lunch through my job. And so I'm like, no, not till this time. Sure. And it's nice to not, and there's like candies and cookies in the room and stuff like that. And I'm like, that is the worst thing you could eat if you're going to break your fast. And that's another like personal rule I have is I try to eat, like I eat sweets, but I also try to eat a lot of whole foods in general, just like meats, vegetables, and fruits in general. That I try to make that the bulk percentage. And while I might have like a cookie at the end or something like that, that's after eating a lot of like whole vegetables that I've already cooked and meats and stuff like that. So I've really liked it because of a discipline thing as well, of like, no, you could like, I don't know, today I was just my mind was in a different space, I think, with everything I had going on with this and preparing for the previous one that got canceled and stuff like that. I was just on autopilot, and I was midway through my workout, and I was like, oh, I didn't eat today, but I'm still like working out at the same energy level and stuff like that. So it's weird how that, like, the body can kind of adapt to that. And it's interesting too, from like a psychological perspective, where, and this might get like too philosophical, but like I had something meaningful to do today, and it kept me from having those cravings. And I don't find as much meaning as I would today as I do currently in my job. And that's a whole different thing. But it's really interesting where I have more cravings when I have less cravings when I'm in more of a meaningful pursuit within that day.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so to turn it back, it's really great that we've made calories cheaper, but now we have this problem of almost too abundance of calories, like you were talking about. And it's good to go. What I thought about when you said that, actually, it's good to go hungry, is there's a weird thing that there's some research on this that I don't know well, but I could speak personally. There's a cool thing. It's kind of gross, but like, I know that I've like, the fasting is doing good when like I'm on an empty stomach. I go number 2, and that's like my body like cleared everything out. And there's this weird book I read. I don't know how much scientific legs it has under it, but it was called Toxemia Explained. And the guy was a Ph.D., but he didn't really cite many studies. But he had, I would consider it more of like a theory. Yeah. And what he was talking about was if we keep just like having snacks and the meals and everything constantly, all the waste is just kind of getting built up, especially in the stomach and stuff like that. And so through fasting, and he also prescribed like enemas, I think I'm saying that right, which is shooting water up the butthole to clear it out and stuff like that, which I don't know if I'd go that far necessarily, but the whole idea behind it is that there are these different compounds that our body has spent, and if we don't give it ample time to get rid of these things, on top of pressing these hamburgers into our stomachs at the same time, you're going to get an abundance of calories, and then also those almost toxic materials aren't leaving your body as well, which is really an interesting theory. You know, he wasn't citing studies necessarily, but in theory it makes sense, right? Of like, not to go on another ramble, but with breathing, having like a full breath of air out to allow all that spent air out is another where, I see that at play. I kind of covered multiple topics there. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Again, I don't know too much about human anatomy and physiology beyond what I studied in high school, but I'm assuming like your GI tract, it's probably just like any other muscle. You just need to give it some time just to relax and chill out. And I heard the same thing too. Like it's better not to eat like a big meal right before you go to sleep, just so your body can just shut down and recover. It doesn't need to process stuff or anything like that.
What's your diet currently look like?
Yeah, so it's almost entirely plant-based. So everything that I purchase for myself that I cook is completely from plants. Okay. But if I'm going to like a potluck or like going to a restaurant or something like that and it has eggs or butter and milk in it, like I'll eat it just because for where I'm at with, plant-based diet, it's more towards the ecological reasons like we explained before. And if I'm with a group of friends, I'm like, I can't go to this restaurant because there's going to be butter in the food I'm going to eat. That really doesn't help what I'm trying to promote, because then then it just seems stringent and it turns people off of the plant-based diet. So I'm like, I keep it a little bit more flexible. But for when I go to Sprouts supermarket or Walmart to pick up food, it's always pretty much entirely plant-based. Okay. So I wake up and I eat overnight oats every single morning. Love my overnight oats. And so I put some flax seeds in it. I put some chia seeds, put some walnuts on there, slap some peanut butter on it, and then various fruits and berries and such. That's what I have for breakfast. And then every weekend, which I'm going to do right after this podcast, is I do all my meal prep for the week. So I make one huge dish, which I eat for kind of lunch for the rest of the week. And then I make a huge salad so I can get lots of different vegetables, eat that throughout the week. And then I supplement the rest with just like a bunch of peanut butter sandwiches. Okay. Just to get some nice protein and get some really caloric dense stuff. And so I'd say that's probably the most processed thing I eat, which is just some chunky peanut butter, the cheapest chunky peanut butter from Walmart you can find. Because also I'm a graduate student, so I don't make a bunch of money. But so that's kind of where it's focused on. Yeah.
Is it tough finding calorically dense foods like within a meal? Like like for me, I feel like I eat a lot of food. And so one of the maybe I don't know if it's a barrier, but one of my thoughts is like, I would eat a lot of salad in a sitting just to feel full.
Yeah.
Right. So is that a problem, or like something you have to really consider when you're meal prepping for your week?
Nope. Because the salad it's just kind of just a side thing that I do just deliberately to get, eat spinach and different healthy kind of vegetables. Because a lot of it's just really dense pasta, really dense stews, curries, and that kind of stuff. So a lot of beans, a lot of rice. And so I find that it's usually pretty dense. I never feel like, oh man, I just ate all that, I'm not even full. So that's not something I really encounter too much.
Yeah. When you draw this idea out of yourself, do you see it being more of a good thing to have the population closer to the majority being plant-based? Would you take it that far? Or what are your thoughts on that for more broad scale groups of people in general? If you have an opinion on that.
Ideally, I think, yes, I'd like to see people move towards more plant-based diets, I'd say. So, yeah.
Okay.
I think, I just think the health benefits are pretty established. And I think too, and anecdotes aren't the best thing to use, but my parents, they're in their 50s and they've shifted towards more plant-based diet because that's what me and my brother started doing, and then they were kind of curious, and they're in really good shape from that, and they say they've really enjoyed it. And so from everyone that I've heard shifting to plant-based, I've never really heard of someone be like, oh, this was a bad move, I've developed more health problems because I've done this. Which isn't a legitimate study or anything like that, but I'd say from my experience and from the peers I have who've done it, I've never encountered a situation where someone's shifted towards a more plant-based diet and has regretted it and said, okay, I need to go back to eating more animal products rather than this pivot towards more plants.
Yeah. I think maybe people from the other side that might like criticize the idea would be there would be concerns of not getting enough protein, and then also concerns of nutrient deficiencies. Okay. So do you have thoughts to that?
Yeah. So from in terms of getting enough protein, there are lots of ways to get protein from plant-based diets, whether it's peanut butter, lentils, beans, all sorts of different stuff. The dietary nutrition deficiency, that's a very legitimate concern. And so the only supplements I take, one, you got to make sure you get your omega-3s. And so that's how I eat a lot of flax seed meal, chia seeds, and walnuts to get my omega-3s. And then the big critique is vitamin B12, which is completely legitimate. And so I take a vitamin B12 supplement. And then that's pretty much the only supplements I take for that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Would you think that it would be fine to shift back onto like a even split of fats, or not, more of plants and meats if the meats were sourced maybe from hunting? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I can definitely, and then that gets more towards the ecological and environmental argument, where that's a much more sustainably source of animal products if you go out and hunt it yourself, rather than what we're seeing with kind of an industrial agriculture with massive cattle farms and that kind of stuff. And I think too, I didn't grow up in a household where hunting was very big, but I've heard that it's a very, a traditional thing in a lot of households, and it brings the family together, and those kinds of things, that has so much value to it. And your ecological footprint is very low for doing that. And then also, if you're hunting, I'm assuming you have to be kind of, deliberate with how you ration out the food, and you can't, it's very different than just going to like the supermarket and just buying a bunch of hamburgers or something like that. Like, it's a different kind of environment. And so if people said, okay, like we still want to eat our meat, but we want to pivot towards more hunting sources, I feel like that's a step in a great direction.
Yeah. And I personally didn't grow up in a hunting family either. I had a lot of friends that did it. Yeah. I kind of wish I grew up in that, but I do have a goal at some point, once different projects I'm already currently doing are a little more settled and wrapped up. That's another project I'd like to take on in the future, is learning how to do so, purchasing a firearm for that, and learning how to, whatever, I don't even know what it takes, honestly, tracking or whatever, calls and everything, cleaning it and processing it and different things like that. I would like to move to that at some point, because I do eat I keep saying it, I do eat a lot of food, and part of that is a lot of meat, and I would like to, I'm not happy with where it's sourced, sure. but it's kind of a availability thing for me. Like you said, some people don't have the availability. So that's a personal goal of mine that I'd like to get to. I personally could not see myself. I would try it for like a month, like plant-based. I think all your like approaches and ideas are very rational and very approachable. Yeah. Like I really appreciate that, because some people are like, just quit cold turkey, just like jump into it. Right. Yeah. And I appreciate that. It's like, no, just do a meal, see how that feels, do a day, see how that feels, maybe 2 days, 3, and then you're on it, and then see how it feels and everything like that. Like I really appreciate that, because I think we need to hear more of that actual logical approach to it. That's a lot easier for people to approach if they want to do it.
Yeah. And I think what I really like about that approach of you getting into hunting, I think it's really good that we get more connected with where our food comes from. And because if you go to the supermarket and you pick up hot dogs or you pick up some carrots, like from your perspective, like you have no idea how those two different things got there. And so I think that's excellent to realize the process of how we acquire those types of food. And then, I would not recommend anyone be vegan for a month. Just don't try that, because it's too drastic of a shift, And so, just start super, super small. And like I began eating more plants my sophomore year of college, and I wasn't, predominantly plant-based for probably like a year and a half, because I just took it really slow. I was like, I'm just going to test this out, see how it goes. And just kind of kept doing it. I was like, it's cool.
Yeah. So, dip a toe in and just see how it feels. Right. Yeah. I think that the industrial farming is horrible. Sure. But I almost see a flip side of that with monocrop agricultural. Sure, yeah. Which is kind of like, not to make it polarized, but kind of like your side of the thing. Sure. In a sense, right? It's like, how do we, if we're not sourcing calories from animals that are in these industrialized plants, we're sourcing calories from these monocrop agricultural things. And there's some evidence of like, the processing of those grains and different things like that kill small animals and insects and different things like that. So it's like, from a moral standpoint, there's weird gray area there that I think doesn't get a lot of air of like, if we go to that spot, there's still some sort of death at play. Right. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, so I used to work during COVID, my job during COVID was working at a farm. And so, one of the farmers there, he would always say like, all food is death. Regardless of what you eat, you're killing something. And so then it just kind of, it sounds bad, but then it comes down to a decision of like, what are we morally okay with killing with? Yeah. And so, so with like, monoculture, agriculture, I'm sure you will be, I mean, obviously there's habitat displacement because you need a lot of field to make, grains and such and do all that agriculture stuff. But when it comes to like the moral argument, I think there are aspects of that could be kind of in the gray area, like you suggested. But I think compared to meat production on the industrial scale, I think it's a little bit more black and white on which one's morally more.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah. I had a thought and then I totally lost it. The reason I brought up that book, $75 billion.
Yeah, Save the World.
Is one of the almost criticisms you could wield. Like not that you were wielding it, but like they had 20 something goals just within sustainability. Was that right? And I think they have over 200 goals in general, they being the UN, right? And to me, that seems like you're spreading yourself too thin, right? And you connected those two, but I feel like those aren't connected because you actually have a really solid approach of breaking down a week. And to me, if you were to make what their pursuit is into what a person would do, it's like trying to break down everything you did every 30 minutes for the next year. Wow. Like it's right. Like it's like you're trying to do a shotgun spread of hitting so many things. It's what I picture in my head. And then at the same time, managing to juggle these many balls, right?
Sure.
And so I guess I don't see the connection necessarily that you're trying to make, because I think you're doing a great, like I try to break down my week as well. And I think that's a good approach, because thinking past even 2 weeks is sometimes hard, right?
Sure.
But you can kind of figure out what you're going to do today and have a rough idea of what you're doing that week. Mm-hmm. But when you have over 200 goals you're trying to reach, like as a person, that's hard. Sure. As an organization, that's still very hard, right? So you connected those two things, and I don't know if they're connected necessarily. And I think like that's why I like the book, is it gives a little bit more guidance on like what maybe top 10 things of the 200 we should work on, right? Mm-hmm. And it kind of gives you a little bit more. That's good strategy in the sense of broad scale stuff, but then we actually need more tactics of like day-to-day stuff, of things you're proposing and stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that whole idea.
Yeah, I think
because I like that you said you mapped it, you're mapping some of these things that are broad scale onto yourself, and it kind of flows through you into these different broad scale things, but almost how different organizations are setting things up. To me, it's a little bit disaligned with what you're doing. So I don't know if you've put thought to this, but maybe there's some ideas you might have that still map to you and might be a critique of ways organizations can go about these things to have more of a tactful approach and be more pragmatic at solving these decisions, right? Like I remember why I connected it. Like putting a price tag on things gives people an actual number to think about. Sure. Because if you think about $75 billion or 75 billion people, like we can't think past 2 or 10 people, or $100 in our pocket. So being more tactful and more narrow is kind of what I'm getting at. And that's what you do in your personal life. And you're saying you cast that onto these bigger things. Sure. But when I look at the bigger things, they're not necessarily doing that. Right. And I don't know if you've put thought of this. It's kind of a big idea.
Yeah, but, no, that's interesting. So what I would say is the things that I do in terms of planning, week to week, semester to semester, that's more focusing on like management of things. And versus what the UN does is it's more leadership-based decisions. And so the distinction I make between management and leadership is management is doing things right, and then leadership is doing the right things. And so what the UN, I feel like, is doing with identifying these goals, and they are lofty, and it's not like you said, maybe not the most tactful because they're not providing a plan. But what those goals are identifying is like, these are the right things we need to do. This is the direction we need to go in. And then that book, like you were referencing, is more taking the management approach of, okay, those are the right things to do. Now, how are we going to do them correctly? What is the actual plan? And so I definitely do see that distinction between the UN's 200 goals for humanity versus what I plan to do on a weekly basis. I certainly think there is a lot of disconnect there. Yeah. But I like the idea of that, like, these are the things that we need to address and just kind of go from there with that kind of objective. Yeah. Those things are worthless unless you do have like a tactful plan. But I think it's important to establish those goals that can give us some general guidance where we want to go to, but then that needs to be supplemented with more, as I described, kind of management stuff on how are we actually going to do it. Yeah. Because if all you do is focus on management, you might be really effective at doing things, but if you don't have those leadership decisions, you could be doing things really correctly, but you might not be even doing the right thing in the first place. And so I think the analogy that I've heard been used is like you are trying to clear cut a path in a forest, and the managers are all really focused on, making sure that we're being as efficient as possible. We got the machetes sharpened, we're working around the clock, things are effective. And then the leader, stands up on top of a tree and looks like, oh, we're not even in the right forest, guys. We're not even in the right, kind of area. Yeah. And so I think those UN goals kind of dictate what forest we should be in. And then more of the tactful, how we're going to do that is more of the management end of, okay, this is actually how we're going to identify that. But I think if you don't have those specific or even more general goals identified in the first place. You're just kind of aimlessly being effective at things that might not even be that important to be effective at.
Yeah.
And that's how I kind of feel right now with like graduate school a little bit, in terms of having that perspective of like, what are your actual goals? What are the end goals of this? Because even if you're a really good graduate student, you're a really good researcher, but you're researching things that, one, aren't important, maybe have already been done before, you need those kind of overarching leadership decisions to point in the right direction. And then you can take over with doing things very tactfully and specifically and correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. And that's a tough balance. And I have many thoughts on that. Like, I connect that to many things. One being conservatism and liberalism. The other being the story of I think of it as a story. I think it was like a Survivor episode, but people are trying to survive on an island. And there was one dude that was very narrow-minded, like you're saying, with the forest chopping. And he made a simple spear, and every day would spear like 2 fish. And everybody was able to eat every day. And then there's this other guy that was that big scale thinker. And he was spending every day like weaving a net together and all these different things,
I see what you're saying.
and casting it out and missing a bunch of times. And then towards the end of the whole event, he caught like 40 fish in one cast after all, and people were getting frustrated with him. Right. And then, but then they have 40 fish now. And so the whole analogy was just like, we need these people that are spearing just 2 every day for us. But then we also need these big scale workers of casting a wide net, missing very often, but then eventually bringing in that big 40, right?
That's great.
To me, when I don't, as a casual observer of the UN at 22 years old, to me, I feel like there's too much leaning into these big net casts. That's my personal point of view. And I think I want to see more spear guys. I think even being slightly, maybe a little bit off target, but actually just putting some action into the world yields more than like maybe having a super detailed idea of everything that there is to get done. And that's personally how I see things. To me, a cynic could kind of look at what they're doing and think it's, in a sense, virtue signaling of like, look at all our fun goals. And then some things are reached, but then a lot maybe aren't because they're so broad. And it's good to have shoot for the stars, but a cynic could be like, you guys are just saying that to say it. And in a certain sense, some of these things, to see them track out, take so many decades that the people say we're going to reach for this won't even be in the positions when they said it. And so when they say it, you can look good, but then you'll be out of there before people even see if the solution actually came about. And I get worried with that, you know, because you can have easy phonies make it look like things are getting done, but then there's not even a net being made, so to speak. Right. And it's, to me, like, just, I think personally it comes from just how I'm wired. I like that spear thrower a lot more. And I think we need the net guys. I really do. We do need them. This is an argument that we should get rid of those people. I think in certain things we have too many net guys though. I think we're a little off balance personally. Yeah. And I don't really know the inner workings of the United Nations. Me neither. Yeah.
And, so I can only comment on it so much, but I understand the sentiment that you're getting at. I don't know whether it's the UN's responsibility to, because I have no idea what jurisdiction they have over what countries can and can't do. And like, I think it's just more this it's almost kind of, it kind of look at as of like, just like this big think tank of this is what we could go towards, which I think is important. But of course you need people to actually implement those plans.
Yeah. For you, looking at your week and like setting things up and scheduling things, and seems like you're more on the orderly side. Would you?
I'd say so. Yeah.
Say that. Yeah. Do you have a philosophy around that, like scheduling things and why certain things are scheduled over others and stuff like that?
That's a good question. So the reason why I schedule my week rather than just like, okay, what am I gonna do tomorrow? And then you do that day and then you do tomorrow, is because you get caught up in the thick of thin things when you do that, because then you're just concentrated on things that are urgent. This is what I need to get done tomorrow, and you do that. And so what is helpful about the week, I can look at the entire week and think about, okay, and a week isn't that much time, but it's really hard to like detail plan out a month of what you're going to do every single day.
Yeah.
And so a week is really nice because I can identify the different roles that I have, and then over the course of this week, how can I make sure that I'm fulfilling them, whether it's, being a graduate student, being in a band, making sure I'm exercising and climbing, putting effort towards seeing friends and doing that kind of stuff. It's easier to make sure you're fulfilling all of those different aspects when you look at things on a weekly scale versus on a daily scale. Because if I was on the daily scale, I'd be like, okay, tomorrow I got to go to grad school, and then the next day I go to grad school, and I'd just be focusing on these things that are really urgent, but maybe necessarily not that important, but they seem important because I'm just thinking on this short scale of just one day.
Yeah.
And so in terms of how to prioritize one thing over the other, I think it also helps to look on that weekly time frame, because then you don't get lost in the urgency of things that need to get done tomorrow that might actually not be that important over the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. For me, I have a quota for different things I do. It's 5 workouts a week. With this, it's a quota or goal of to have 3 interviews scheduled. Those things are more like scheduled, and then other things are like I meal prep as well. So one day a week I need to make a big bulk of food for myself. 40 hours of work at my current job. 2 of those workout days are climbing days. I don't put much of an emphasis around friends right now. It kind of is a little more spontaneous, I guess.
Sure.
Writing every other day at least, but trying to have a synthesized piece by every Sunday.
Okay.
Because I want to get better at writing, and I have a Substack I post to, so just to have a deadline to things.
Yeah, deadlines are key.
So different things that, to me, I think of them as like quotas, basically, which are basically just goals.
Yeah.
Do you think I need to have 3 friend interactions this week? I need to climb twice. I need to, do you put numbers to these things? I guess is what I'm asking.
I usually have kind of a set schedule where Monday is, I work, and then I go to a Spanish group and I dance salsa. Tuesday I climb, Wednesday I run, Thursday I climb and dance salsa, and then the weekends are kind of like, I kind of leave that a little bit open just so that if something comes up that seems kind of fun, I can hop in. Because I try to stay away from being too regimented where you can't break out your own schedule.
Yeah. What does that feel like when things get too rigid? Because I've found that too in my life sometimes. Do you know what, where you're to me it's I think I heard this line somewhere, but it was like, if things aren't working out, you're being too rigid with things. Yeah. And it's just like you need a little bit more flow. Yeah. Be a little more fluid to things.
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely a lot of truth to that. And in terms of quantifying, I try not. It depends. Like when I was in college and I was running competitively, that was quantitative because I got to run at least 55 miles this week. When am I going to put those miles in? Yeah. And then now I'm trying to step back from that a little bit more. And in terms of social interactions, a lot of it is kind of just already put in. When you go salsa dancing, you salsa dance with other people. So you're hanging out with other people and you see your friends. And then, climbing, I try to, reach out to folks and see if they'd like to climb or go for a run or something like that. And just be more intentional and, making sure you have time for yourself. Sometimes I just need to go for a run by myself and just kind of chill out. But I think if I'm doing something socially or kind of doing something as a sort of hobby in the evening, try to incorporate other people into it, especially when you move to a new area and you're just trying to get yourself established and kind of make friends and that kind of stuff. That's a time period I find that's really important to make sure you're putting effort towards that and being very intentional with developing those relationships.
Yeah. And how do these things, different things connect? Do they connect to specific goals for you, or do you just do them because they're fun, or do you connect them to a more overarching scheme for yourself? Yeah,
sometimes with dancing, it's okay, I want to be able to do this move by the end of the summer, or climbing lead send this route outside or something like that. So yeah, sometimes they're kind of oriented towards something larger. And that kind of goes back to like the difference between leadership and management, where on the day to day, you know, I got to get my climb workout in. That's more towards management. And then like I'm working towards this goal of I want to, you know, send Edge of Time over in Rocky Mountain National Park. That's kind of like the overarching thing I'm kind of striving for. Yeah. But I try not to, you know, make sure that things are deliberate and intentional, but not try to be too focused on that. Because sometimes you fall in the pit where you overanalyze what you're doing, and sometimes it's important, like you said, like when you're too scheduled, things aren't working out, you might be too rigid, and just kind of chill out. So like last weekend I was feeling a little burnt out about things. I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go to City Park and I'm just gonna read a book, and like is this contributing to these specific goals I've identified? Like no, but it's important just to like be able to just chill out and go read a book in a park or something like that, to not get too crazy.
I have a problem with that I'm constantly balancing and battling, of just, I don't know, because I like to be productive, and sometimes I get really down on myself when I'm not productive, even if like I've done so many things maybe throughout the week that it would compensate for an off day. But I try to like squeeze in a bunch of little things every single day, just to you know, have a nibble at a thing instead of taking one whole bite, so to speak. But sometimes I skip one nibble and I get down on myself pretty hard. And it's just a balance, you know. Sometimes I'm really good on it and can just be like, you'll just come back the next day, or just give it an hour and whatever, you know. But it's always a balance, you know, because I like to be, I guess you would say, very productive. I like to be doing a lot of things in succession, you know.
Oh man, yeah, I hear that.
Do you feel that?
Yeah. Like, and that's what comes from being pretty specific with planning your week and stuff. You know, like you identify these things, and so you try to accomplish them. And I think it also just depends on what we construe as productivity. So, like, you know, the example of going to City Park and just reading a book, like, sure, that isn't productive to my goals, but that's a really important thing to do, and just kind of slow down and just appreciate small things like that. And because I think if you get too focused on productivity, you really think about the utility of things too much. And so, like, if it's not constructive to my goals, if it's not productive in the way I define that, then it's not that important. I think that's where it can get kind of dangerous, and that's why it's really important to reevaluate those goals and kind of what you're trying to do. Because then if in the end what your you know, the kind of the leadership thing, it doesn't matter how effective you are at those things if it's not even worth doing in the first place. And so, but yeah, I try to make I think trying to make the most out of your day is an objectively good thing to do. And I think it also depends on when you're not being quote unquote productive, like what are you doing? Are you sitting on the couch on your phone? Then I would agree that that's kind of a waste of time. Or are you like, you know what, I'm just going to go outside. I'm just going to go for a walk. I'm just going to read a book, you know, something like that. I feel like is a lot better use of your time if it's not, you know, directly contributing to your goals.
Yeah. I have two thoughts to that. It's a word I've been trying to work out. There's probably already a word that exists, and I don't know if it quite describes it properly, but what comes to mind is like meta competence or meta strength. It depends on the context.
Okay.
But the idea of the meta part is why I use that, is it's self-referential in the sense that maybe it's productive in the sense that I was able to let loose a bit, right?
Yeah.
But because then I can do all these more rigid, hardcore things that I schedule in at a more efficient way.
Sure.
And so it's self-referential in the sense of like knowing when to take rest to be able to have those sprints.
Yeah,
almost.
Definitely.
And
yeah, it's being unproductive. I'm using air quotes, like in the short term, but in the long term, it actually really helps.
It's like unproductively productive.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Is how I think of it.
Taking time to rest
yeah.
Because I mean, you could climb every single day, and like you would think that would make me better because I'm doing it all the time, but no, you need to rest and take breaks, and you know, on the longer term scale, it helps.
And what was the other thought? Man, I forgot. Damn. Yeah, I don't know if that's I think the meta part's a good thing. I think maybe it needs just more nuance, because to me, like, somebody can be strong, but some people got strong and they don't know how they got strong. Like, in a gym sense.
Okay.
Like, they might be the bodybuilder type, but at some point, hypothetically, there's a coach maybe backing them. Is the, like, metaphor I always think about. And, like, if the coach dies, and your whole workout structures are now falling apart, do you actually have competency within being strong? And it's like understanding what to do with your hands, but then we kind of are connecting again, like, broad scale, why does this matter, of putting these pieces together? Like, how to manipulate them, how to structure a workout, how to go about a day of climbing, but then broad scale, how does this fit into everything else? Sure. You know, and some people either have that kind of given to them or planned for them, and they don't realize it until, sadly, in some circumstances, tragedy hits where that force is taken out, and then they're left to their own devices, and they realize that they don't have the devices to implement these things. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Do you know the idea of a Renaissance man?
If I know correctly, it's a person who does, like, just a lot of different stuff. Yeah. They're not pigeonholing themselves, whether it be, you know, intellectually or spiritually or anything. Just a person who tries to dip their toes in a lot of different things.
Seems like you're a little bit of that.
Yeah, I do try to do that. I appreciate you saying that, because that's actually something I've been working on. Because in college, the first few years, I just kind of ran and studied chemistry, and that was kind of it. And then, so since then, I've been trying to do a lot more kind of stuff, and it's biting me back in the ass a little bit, because you can get a little bit too strung out. You're doing too many things, and then you can't really dive into any one of those things. But I think there's always lots of value in trying new things, even if you don't really dive into it too much. It's going to be a dynamic person for sure.
Where do you see, like, how does that get off balance for you? Like, where maybe you're taking on too many things, or you have too many hobbies, or, cause we only have, like, I at least once a month, but at least once a week, like, think of a profession I wish I could do, but it would be a whole different life course than what I'm planning on doing in actuality, where, like, sometimes I think about, in, like, a different sense of the mainstream, opening up a weird fast food restaurant, or, like, wanting to be a city planner to design how housing and restaurants and everything are arranged, urban planning, cool. And, like, I have all these thoughts, and I'm like, you can't do that. Like, you got to stay on this track. Yeah. Like, that's a whole different pivot, and it sounds cool, but it's probably not me. But, like, I have so many things I would love to do. Wow. And there's only so much time in the world, and I'm already pushing things. I'm doing my best to push things to their max, as I think you are as well, of just, like, what can I jam into this moment? And that was the other thought.
We're some pretty similar people.
Yeah. The other thought that I really loved, and I think you'll like it. This was somebody else's idea, but I still think about it, is they went to, I think they went to a movie. I think it was La La Land. And that movie's about people dancing and stuff like that. And he went with his wife, and they had a great time. Okay. And upon stepping out, he, like, wasn't mad about it, but made the observation of, like, I just paid money and 2 hours of my time to watch a couple fall in love and dance, when I could have been doing that with my own wife that I took her to. And it was an idea of outsourcing our experiences. Okay. Was the idea he connected it to, which I really like, where sometimes I stare at my phone and I'm like, why I do this way too much? Why do I do this? I should be just doing the things I like watching myself, right? Yeah. Instead of watching climbing videos, to a certain point, you just need to start climbing, right? What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that's great. I think the value of that is because maybe that person, if he hadn't watched Ryan Gosling go dance on stage for 2 hours, maybe you wouldn't have had that realization like, oh, maybe that's something I should try. And so sometimes it's how you react to that stuff. Same thing with like social media. You see other people doing really, really cool stuff and you're like, oh man, like that, I feel bad about myself because I'm not doing cool stuff. And then you can react from that in two ways. You can kind of feel bad, or it's like, oh, maybe this should be a prompt to like maybe do something different and try something new. I think it's important not to overexpose yourself to those things, because then you start misinterpreting your life, where it's like all these things I could be doing and I'm not doing it, when in actuality you could be leading like a really, really cool life, but you're just, always comparing it to other people. But there was a specific instance that completely reminded me of that. When my parents were here in Fort Collins, and on their last night, I wanted to show them like the different things that I had gotten into since moving to Colorado. So I took them rock climbing at like Whetstone. I took my mom out salsa dancing to show her that. And so for their last night, I wanted to show them a band in Fort Collins that I really enjoyed, and I knew the buddies and the people in the band were some of my friends. And so we went out and watched the show, and it was great. And during it, because I also really enjoy playing music, and something I really enjoy doing. And my dad kind of said, like, look at, like you can get that fill by just coming here and, watching other people play the music. Like, doesn't that kind of scratch that itch? And I was like, Dad, you don't understand. When you do it, it's a way different experience. And so kind of like La La Land, you can go there and be entertained doing that. But then you think like, oh man, why am I not doing that myself? And so I feel that a lot about especially with music, and trying to do that yourself. But I think it's really important not to think about that too much, because unfortunately I've realized this, you can't do everything. And so you just gotta identify what are the things that I really want to do, and you just gotta do those. And I mean, it goes like the idea of opportunity cost. Like when you pick one decision, you've given up everything else that you could have done. And so I think it's important to consider that, but not think about that too much. And then how would you decide to do anything? Because there's everything that you could do.
Yeah. And that's the problem I sometimes find. I was like, I want to be a city planner. I want to be a dietitian. I want to go personal train people. Yeah. It's like, they all sound so fun. Yeah.
I think it's a frustrating problem, but I think it's a good thing to be like, wow, there's so much cool stuff to do, rather than be in a situation like, man, I don't really even want to do anything. Like nothing seems interesting right now.
Yeah. And I think it's like diagnosing that and then actually finding things that jive with that. Like, I think that's why this works for me well, is I kind of get to like dip into the minds of other people within a conversation for a good bit. And like, I was a podcast addict. I still love podcasts, but would listen a lot. And then at some point I was like, I want to be doing my own conversations. There's some points in some podcasts where I'm like, why didn't you ask this question? Like, you should have been, and they asked something completely different, which is fine. But I'm like, you could have taken this down a totally different road with this type of expert or person or anything like that. So it got to the point where I was like, how much is equipment?
Just do it yourself. And it out.
Now I got all this shit, and I'm just like, what have I gotten myself into? But I'm like I said, I try to do 3 a week. People cancel and stuff like that, so have a good number. I didn't do much last week because I was trying to get the camera in check, because I really want to put video to it and everything like that. And it's nice to get back into it, just to be able to like. We're almost talking for 2 hours, and like it's been at least an hour and a half. And it's just flies by. I've had a 4.5 hour conversation with a buddy, and that was till like 2 a.m. in the morning, and I was pretty dog tired after that, but it was pretty fun. And I think I get to kind of like I said, experience people's lives a little bit, and then still connect with this. And we were talking before, and there's ideas that we need to figure out, that not everybody agrees on. And it's just like, some things there's gray area and needs more research, but then there's other things that are pretty foundational that aren't being taken as foundational, right? And maybe that's just an education problem. It depends on the issue to put more nuance to it, but that's a side venture, I guess, of this, is just let's figure these things out, you know, and actually have approachable ways of tackling these problems, and being able to chalk some of it out. Like, yeah, there's maybe a little bit of nutritional problems, but you can supplement with that, and there's workarounds for not having meat as your primary protein source, you know. So digging into the actual tactics of some of these things, you know, is a side goal of many different things I want to do with this, you know, and just bring a voice to other people. I'm curious if you have a thought about this. Actually, I'm going to leave that. I'll come back to that. I personally have found, to go back on the productivity stuff, that's hard for me within the first 12 hours of going to family events to slow down. I don't know if you've had a similar experience to this, but I'm like,
where does your family live?
Mostly in Colorado. There's some in California and Wyoming. And
how often do you see them?
The most recent one was a couple weekends ago. My uncle got married, and so I got to see a bunch of family in one place and stuff like that, which was great. But I'm personally a morning person, and so I'm up by 5:30, 6, or sometimes 7 if I didn't get to bed early enough, because I prioritize sleep over everything else. But
that's very
I'm up and then I'm going. Like, I don't use an alarm clock currently. I just kind of get up and go.
That's very healthy. That's good sleep rhythms right there.
Yeah, it's helped. Sleep has been a big priority lately, and I don't always reach it, but that's the goal, you know. And it's just up and going. The last couple days with this being settled and scheduling these things, like the one before this was really big, because the guy I didn't know, but I wanted to really do a good interview, and we're going to reschedule. But like I was waking up at 5:30 just because he was on my brain, in a sense of like, I want to make this good. And it's hard to sleep through that sometimes. Got off on a tangent, but it's like, wake up, there's always something. Either I'm cleaning up my room. This morning I was cleaning up my room because it was a fucking mess, but usually it's reading or writing or whatever the hardest thing of that day is, you know. And so, like, bam, bam, bam. And then I like kind of being on my own right now, because I can just say, okay, I have 10-hour shift at work. We're hitting that. And then after that, gym. And then after that, eating. And then bed, probably, because the 10-hour takes up a lot. But then, like today, it was wake up, clean room, wash sheets. I was listening to, this guy was a musical artist, so I was listening to all his music to kind of get an idea of him as I was doing that.
That's
so
super cool.
To be double productive at the same time. And then I hit the gym, and upon leaving the rec center, and this kind of was the other thought I'll get into later, I saw a bunch of people outside the Planned Parenthood and stopped and went over and introduced myself to everybody. And I got a couple contacts, because I'd like to have some on, just talk about the whole big issue of abortion and stuff like that from both sides. I'd like to have 2 people. I have a third mic, and so I'd like to have 2 people and maybe have a moderated discussion too.
That'd be pretty sweet.
So I got a couple contacts, and then bounced from that to the farmer's market, because my friend had a mushroom shop up, and I said hi and got some mushrooms, and then bounced from that and got some more podcast stuff from Best Buy, and then here, and then setting up, and researched you a little bit on the car drive. I watched your TED Talk and everything like that. And so it's just bam, 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 bam. Like, but I love it. You know, I love doing my best to string together all these things. And the worst part about this podcast is scheduling people and then people canceling, but it's a part of it, and I'm fine with it. That's the worst part, though. Everything else has been gravy, man, talking to people and everything like that. But I guess to get off that tangent, to transition to like the just la-di-da-di of like, we'll wake up slow and we'll have our coffee and make breakfast and maybe talk a little, and maybe we'll go out and do like a bike ride today before the wedding. Or I'm just like, let's go do something. Let's do something, man. And it connects to other issues that I don't know if we need to connect to, but I don't know if like I've noticed that. Okay. I don't want to put any judgment of bad or good or anything like that, but it's definitely something I've noticed in myself. And I'm like, what is that? And you're similar, it seems like, to me. So I'm curious if you had that same feeling either with friends or family or anything like that.
Yes. That is a very good point. I didn't know other people thought about that. Couple instances talking about the ability to kind of slow down when you're with family. Now that I don't see my family very much, it's tough because I don't have those interactions too often. So when I'm in person with them, I'm not doing anything. It is, I'm with my family. That's what I'm focusing on right now.
That's the most productive thing you do.
Exactly.
Because you don't see them at all.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, maybe it kind of goes back to what you define as productivity. But like, it's not constructive to graduate school. It's not constructive to climbing, but like, I don't care. Like, so for example, I went to Acadia National Park with my mom and dad a couple weeks back, and we were there for about 4 days. And when I was there, I didn't do anything except for be with my mom and be with my dad. That's all I focused on. And I came out of that trip super, super, super happy that I did that. I got way behind in graduate school stuff, but that was way more important. And so when I'm with family in person, that's all I'm focusing on. And even if like, oh man, I wish like we could, I have that tendency of like try to maximize the day as much, but this is a different way of maximizing the day. But when it comes to long distance stuff, that's where I suck. With maintaining those relationships on a distance thing. Like an example of it was I wanted to call my brother and just kind of chat and see what he was up to. And because I had kind of felt that our relationship had become a little bit, no pun intended, but like distant because we don't see each other that much anymore. And he was a really good running buddy back when I was in Michigan. And so I was like, okay, I need to call my brother, but I also want to run. So I'm going to just do it at the same time. So I ran and chatted with my brother, which I thought was a fair idea because you're maximizing your productivity, doing two things at once. And then I was chatting with my dad the other day, and I had expressed I feel a little bit more distant with my brother, and then he said that like Nathan, my brother, has been feeling that too, and he felt kind of bad that you didn't take the time just to sit down and just talk with him. Like you are going for a run, you're doing all these things, and then other people construe that as I don't have time for you, or maybe I do, but I'm also going to do this other stuff. And he said same thing, like I FaceTime my parents every weekend, and sometimes I do that when I'm cutting vegetables and stuff, because I'm like, wow, I can do this as well. And they said, but like, dude, just sit down and talk to us. Like, you don't, like, that's important, but like, come on. And so that's one thing I've been really trying to do, is like when I'm interacting with people and I'm spending time with people, like really try to prioritize that, because the other stuff of trying to maximize your day, it could end up really actually not being that important or that valuable. Like if I miss a day of climbing, like sure, that kind of sucks, but that's not really in the end of scheme of things. It's not that big of a deal. But if I divert more time away from maintaining a relationship with my parents, maintaining a relationship with my brother, that could actually have some serious consequences that I don't want to experience because that's really important to me. And so to kind of summarize that, when I'm in person with them, I really don't find too much difficulty in slowing down because I value those interactions more than pretty much what other things I have going on. But when it comes to keeping in contact with them kind of electronically through phone calls, I struggle with that a lot more. I need to do a better job of focusing on just that.
Yeah. To get a little deeper, and you can answer this however you want. What are those in-person interactions like? What do you guys spend your time on when you're actually in person?
So I'm a little bit of a hypocrite because like when I'm with them, like let's do as much as we can, So like when we went to Acadia, we would wake up and we would go, hike for most of the day, and then we get dinner and we go back to our little hut that we had rented and just kind of go to sleep. And so when I go back home, that's so funny. Like when I went back home for Thanksgiving and Christmas, I had a whole to-do list of all the things I wanted to do with people. But all those things I wanted to do was devoted towards spending time with people. And like, that's what I was trying to prioritize. Unfortunately, I get along really well with my brother. We're very similar people, and same thing with my parents. So being with them it's never difficult, I think, to slow down because I just enjoy being in that moment so much that other things just kind of fall by the wayside in terms of importance.
I guess what I was relating to was when we're in person, like thinking back to the wedding, especially this was on my dad's side, and a lot of conversations, they definitely don't steer clear of the different things normally like you don't talk about, like always religion and politics and stuff like that is brought up. And I think like younger, it was a good thing because it might have fed some of my curiosity in a broad scale of issues. But now I'm a bit annoyed with it because it's just it's my family, but it's a bunch of people talking about things they're not experts in. And I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah,
like, it's not, to me, it's not productive.
Sure.
And it's us spending time with each other, but like, I don't know. That's something I haven't fully sorted out in my brain yet, but it's something I noticed, and it might be like, I'm like very often watching educational stuff or different perspectives on YouTube to amass more information and be more productive at the same time. And so it was, and you're watching videos on, I try to find the most quality people of experts, and then to just be listening to people that I know for sure don't know what they're talking about a lot of the time. It's hard for me to even like spend time with them when I'm like, I can't even like invest myself in the conversation, so to speak. And I don't think like those topics shouldn't be covered, but maybe just more from like a personal standpoint and not like a broad, like making medical claims that I know you can't back up, and political claims and different things like that, and just claims that haven't been thought out or are borderline conspiratorial, like just broad scale things. And also that side of my family is more liberal skewing, and I consider myself more in the center, and not to get too political, but like I've noticed, and I notice this often when I talk to more liberals, and how they talk about ideas is different than conservatives. It's really interesting to observe. It's really cool. But one of my issues is like, it's not tactful enough. Like we're circling back a bit. And so for me, I like that tactfulness, and because it's more implementable, and like we're talking about within the week, and whatever that looks like for a group to put forward or society to put forward, it looks a little different, but the same idea of like actual things we could be doing. And that's one of my a personal issue I have, where I'll listen and everything like that, but I'm like, man, you're bouncing around between so many different issues that we could be a little more productive if we sat on one and really dug in deep of like, how would we solve this, or what are the options, and different things like that. And so it's that coming from a place of non-expertise most of the time, and then also like hitting so many big complex problems and thinking that this one phrase or sentence like solves the whole thing. And I'm like, pretty sure these things are a little more complicated than your non-expert opinion solving it in a sentence, you know? And that's that hyper, almost being too rigid, right? And that's something I've been battling lately for sure, that I'm still haven't found the balance with, and I don't necessarily know how. Yet. That's not to say that I won't figure it out at some point, but that is another thing I've noticed. And I don't know if like through this, I want to have very productive and high level conversations for the most part. And there's that balance of being maybe more goofy or joking or funny, the other side of things. And there's that, but like, it's almost neither of that in those particular conversations. And so I don't know, like if your, so to speak, Renaissance philosophy translates into the types of conversations you have with people, maybe to ask you that question in general. I've found that with myself with what I've told you. But I don't know if you've seen that with other people that you interact with.
So you're saying that your Renaissance approach to things, how does that affect your interactions with people?
I think like, how does that translate? Like, because we want to be productive. Okay. But how does that translate into conversations? because sometimes you have unproductive conversations.
Oh, sure.
Right. And if for me, at least personally, if I do too many things unproductive, I'm like, yo, we got to take a step back and like figure out why is this unproductive? And then I'm like, if you take that to the conversation context, it's like, well, we're not actually sitting on issues. We're not actually digging deep into these things. We're taking a very tip of the iceberg approach.
Sure.
So I don't know if you see that. Maybe I have more of a focus on ideas. I think that's something maybe I personally just do in general. So maybe it is just me in that sense, but I'm curious if you see that in yourself at all.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also important to acknowledge the situations and circumstances you're in and whether or not the environment is conducive to having a conversation that you can actually go deep into.
Yeah.
So like this, it's an opportunity to do so because we're both just sitting here on a nice sunny day in a dining room area and just kind of having a conversation. Yeah. So I think this is more conducive to that versus if you're at a family gathering where a lot of stuff is going on, you can't really sit down and dive deep into something like that. And so maybe the conversations you have are maybe a little bit more lighter in terms of just, catching up with those people because that's productive too to maintain those relationships or just kind of know what they're up to. But I think if you want to have a more in-depth conversation, I think you need to tailor the environment to that. Mm-hmm. So like ask a certain person to go like for a walk outside for a little bit and just kind of minimize the amount of distractions you have. And that's an opportunity you can kind of go a little bit deeper. Yeah. Because I feel that too, like going to parties and stuff like that in undergrad, like I'm just like not even really talking to people. And then, but I mean, I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot because I'm at a loud party. Of course, you're not going to like be able to have a really engaging conversation with people. Yeah. So I think it is really dependent on kind of what environment you're in too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, I had another thought. So many thoughts. They all escape me half the time. They'll probably come back to me. Yeah, I think that's a really good point of setting up the context to be conducive to that. That's a really good solution to that. Yeah, on that side of the family, it just always goes to that point, like that's always a constant, which I liked as a kid, and it kind of bled into podcasts in a sense where as a kid, I'd just kind of sit and listen. And then podcasts are in that sense like that, where you just sit and listen to a given topic, and depending on the podcast you select, it can be just a conversation or actually a structured episodic format, which is fine. I had a thought of, and looking back, I don't know if I'm right in this, but I wanted more of like a leader to take hold of the whole operation in the family. And I think that connects to many things, because I think personally, the weekend was great. The wedding and everything, seeing family and everything was great. But I'm left to wonder what it would have been like if somebody in the family took a leadership position and maybe I would picture a month, maybe 2 weeks out, called everybody that was coming and connected with them and said, hey, hi, was very friendly and everything like that. But at some point got a little tidbit of what that person wanted to see out of the weekend, because it was a good culmination of a lot of family members of like things to do or things to cover and something like that. And then that person basically did a little survey and then took account of the location of such a thing, and then did kind of what we do, but in a group context of stringing together almost a schedule for the whole family to get through. And maybe it's a family thing. Maybe it wouldn't have worked for my family where everybody's completely fine with just having a very, very, very slow start to a morning and just talking about things. But I know some people like wanted to go on a bike ride in the morning, and there's a different climbing gym there, and I have little cousins that I would like to take climbing and different things like that. So I think I'm very curious to see if that went through, what that would look like and how many people would have engaged more with that than what went down. And so, yeah, where it's kind of like the superhero version of what we try to do for ourselves, where it's like generalizing it to a bigger group than just your individual self. And done right, to me, I get goosebumps. Like, it's so cool because it's hard to string it together for yourself, in a week, right? To stitch all these different things back to back. It's fun because it's like a little dance of scheduling. And when it's things where just you need to show up, it's a little more manageable. But to be the type of, maybe it's what I'm getting at is I would like to be this person. I don't know. I would like to see what that was like, to be that person that could string it together for multiple people. And if you do it enough times, then at the next family events, you already know how some people lean on just activities and stuff like that, where you can kind of be like, oh, I know Nana likes to do this. And then I picture weaving where you just kind of string it together and you're like, some people can't walk a mile. And so maybe we'll all meet for lunch at this particular place. Some people can walk downtown and then the rest will meet in a car and then we all have lunch together, and just like stitching and weaving this nice little, it comes in the form of itinerary, but done in a sense where it's self-referential, where people don't feel like it's rigid. But if they looked behind the stage, maybe it was very rigid in sense of like boom, bam, 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 bam. That was another takeaway I had from the weekend. I was like, what would that have looked like? Is, I guess, where I'm left with. Maybe it's just how I tilt. I'm like, it'd be a lot better. But maybe I think like if it was done perfectly, everybody's feelings would be taken into account, where they had no choice but to be happy, in a sense of like things were hit. If you did it perfectly, it's very hard to string that together, but that's kind of the beauty of it, So I think that was another takeaway from the weekend.
Sure.
I don't know if you have a thought to that. Like, I don't know, researching where you guys went camping and like, oh, there's maybe climbing spots here and I can show my parents that. That was, if you have thoughts to what I just said, I just had another thought.
So when my family pulls up for vacation, we're locked and loaded with an itinerary.
Okay.
We know what we're doing.
Okay.
So like Acadia, I was like, these are the hikes we want to check out. These are the things we want to do. Yeah, because there are families who go on vacations. They're like, we don't have a plan. We're just going to show up and see what happens. I think it's fine. But I'm also like, I'm going to Acadia. Never been there before. May not ever go back there again. So I definitely want to, do some stuff when I'm there. Yeah. So I think that's a fine plan. Just like, hey, we don't see each other very much. What can we do to maximize our time so we can all, really enjoy it?
Yeah.
I think there's merit to that. I think you could fall, as long as you don't just fall too far on the other side of it's too rigid. But I think trying to implement a couple activities to really try to make the most out of it, I think that's a great thing.
And I think like just the amount of like preparation really speaks for itself, of how much, to me, that's how much you care.
Yeah.
For the family and everything.
I'm doing this because I want to be with you and
to maximize like our love, which is a weird thought in a sense, I
mean, I did the same thing. Like I said, when I go back home, I make a huge to-do list of all the things I want to do and people I want to see. And then same thing when I had my last summer in Michigan before I moved out to graduate school. Wrote a bunch of different stuff I want to do. These are the people I want to see. These are the things I want to do with them, and I didn't. And I feel like I did a really good job of maximizing that time that I had left. So I think having a plan like that is good.
Yeah. When you were originally talking about going on your camping trip and stuff like that, a thought I had was, it's interesting, like, do you know the idea of like stepping into somebody's frame, which is like their structure of the world, basically?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And it's usually, what I've been reading lately is used in a dating sense of like either maybe the woman you're dating, her stepping more into your frame and kind of blending more to your life, or you blend to hers. But I'm trying to transpose that onto like families in the sense of like, we kind of step into our own family's frame. And I think maybe part of my idea would be trying to shift that frame a little differently, to where maybe we're talking about these things, but we're walking downtown, or it's on a bike ride, or we're on a hike or something like that. And it's like critiquing that frame a little bit, because when we step out of that into here in our own frame, we have a completely different operation of things. And I see that in you, where your family came here and you were having them step into your frame. You're taking your mom dancing, you're taking them climbing, all these different things where it's like, now step into my frame, you know? So I don't know if you have a thought on that, but I've been lately very interested in like the relationship between males and females and dating dynamics and stuff like that in the modern sense, and frame is a part of that. It's just, I guess, it's backstory, but
yeah, I haven't really thought about that too much. Yeah, I guess you could interpret it as having them kind of step into my frame. I think it was really just an idea of like, these are the things that I got going on out here, and I want, when you go back to Michigan, to have like an idea of kind of what Jacob's up to and what his experience looks like out in Colorado. Yeah.
This is something you might not have an opinion on, but it's been on my mind. With starting this, I've been working out the idea of like, is it good to platform everybody?
Okay. What do you mean by platform everybody?
To maybe have somebody sit in that chair that has radical beliefs.
Okay.
And the idea of platforming people and giving them a voice that might have some very radical or crazy or conspiratorial or very extremist ideals. I think I was thinking of this today because of the people I was planning on having on today, but also I was meeting all those people outside of Planned Parenthood, and a lot of nice people. I met two, how they purported themselves to me, more extreme than the other people I met.
Okay.
And what was cool was it was two, and I would say that they were on opposite ends.
Okay.
Which was really cool to see. But I got contact info from both of them, and there's a side of me that's like, maybe I don't want to have them on just because of like how rigid their different lopsided beliefs are. So I don't know if you have a thought on that. It's a really, I'll open it to you.
Yeah. I think that if you're going to have an interaction like this, like that, I think this is the best kind of environment for it. Because, it's very calm. It's just people sitting at a table. I think that's really nice. I think once you stick a camera in someone's face, they can maybe get a little bit more theatrical and maybe try to, I think maybe it could be a little bit more bombastic of interaction. What you could do is you could have one of the persons on the podcast talk to them, have the other person on the podcast talk to them, and then based on those interactions, think, hey, maybe we should have these two people sit down and talk with each other together. Maybe that could be a good place to start with it.
Yeah, I like that, because I would love to have people that disagree on. That's why I got the third mic, and I'd like to moderate that almost to let some of these ideas battle out, so to speak.
I think then you put a lot of responsibility on your shoulders, though, to make sure you be as impartial as possible. Yeah. And so I think from your standpoint, you're going to have a much more important role in that. And so I would just make sure to really think about how you're going to strategize that interaction.
And I try to put myself in the shoe. Like, there's a lot of gray areas and different ideas, and then there's very extremist examples that I try to put myself in those shoes so that if they were ever to come up, I knew what to do. Okay. I don't know. Do you know I'm going to back up. Like, having a type of person that was maybe a murderer or a pedophile or identified with Nazi ideologies or KKK ideologies, different things, like a very extremist example, right? What would I do if they either wanted to come on or were open to it, or like I had the opportunity to have them on? What would I do? I would be fine with it being off recording, because then it's just, I have nothing against just talking to them person on person. Sure. It's a different dynamic, like you're talking about, especially as somebody that hosts this, of giving them a place to broadcast.
it feels very different when you got a microphone stuck in your face and you feel this sense of, like, oh, importance. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, this opportunity to say something, so I think that does change interaction quite a bit. I think if you're going to have someone with more kind of radical off the beaten path ideas, I think it's important to identify why you want the person on the podcast. And if it's is it to kind of demonstrate that these kinds of people with these beliefs exist? Is it I'm trying to understand this person? I'm trying to understand how they got to these ideas. Am I trying to understand the ideas in the first place? I think you'd want to identify specifically the objectives as to why you'd be interested in having that person on the podcast. Is it just for entertainment value? Here's someone who has really different beliefs, and it's kind of interesting to hear about it. Or is it more, I want to understand how these beliefs were generated and how you came to these conclusions? It just depends on kind of what you're trying to get after and what you're trying to get out of it. Or not get out of it's the wrong word, but like what, the objective and the motivation behind that interview is.
I like that. Yeah. I haven't thought about that. Yeah.
Because you could have those two people that you met at Planned Parenthood on, and is the objective, okay, let's try to argue about these things and have it be more argumentative? Or is it, let's try to understand how two people have diverged completely different on this issue. Let's try to, rather than establish and really concentrate on what your current beliefs are, let's just talk about how we got to that. What did the paths look like? And maybe that can be a little bit more interesting, because we hear a lot of, for debates, kind of the current issue, but I think it'd be interesting to kind of determine, how did these two people diverge so much on this one thing?
Yeah.
Be interesting.
Yeah, there's a question of like how much touch do I put in? Do I let them just rant or ramble, or just
how much you step in?
How much? How much do I guide, or how much do I maybe counter to different things? You know, I'm a big fan of the line, "Let the unreasonable speak, because what they say will be shown as unreasonable." And to me, that saying taken to the extreme is I just have somebody on and let their ideology run. I personally don't have a problem with that, but then letting it broadcast, I'm still trying to figure out of like, well, do you maybe try to put some affront to it? Is that enabling it? To me, also, it's like, well, yeah, you put it up, but different people can see what's up different ways.
Sure.
To me, it would be, if they're very unreasonable, to me, it's a case example of somebody being unreasonable, somebody being either racist or looking for conflict or different things like that. Like, it's a perfect example, which to me, there's educational value in that, of being to be like, because we hear about these people, and I don't disagree that different things exist in our society to a certain percent, but we hear about it more than we see it.
Sure.
And so to have a case example of like, look, this is what this type of person is like, you get a fully fleshed out scope of all their ideas. I think the counter to that is some people are worried that people will take them and not understand that they're unreasonable and take them as reasonable and go off of that. Sure. And then there's like a question of like, who gets to decide, right? Like, that's a big question of like, what speech is hate speech? Where is the line with that, right? And yeah. So that's been a question I've had, and I guess I'm just speaking it to, I really like your point you had earlier of just like, what is the point of this conversation? I think maybe coming in with particular topics to keep it on the rails might help. I think depending on the person, doing my due diligence of research, maybe it would be good to have that other side to kind of roadblock. I think it'd be a lot easier to have two people talking and just be a moderator, because the other person would instinctually just clap back and be able to counter that. And I think in real time, that'd be best case scenario, is to have two people have an open conversation, and let's keep it respectful, but we can hash things out.
Sure. One thing you could do is you could look at like, debates and arguments that were publicly, released, and see which ones worked well, which ones didn't. Try to kind of pick what works, what strategies worked. It's always smart too.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do you see yourself going from here? What are your plans? Like personally, where do you want to take life? Where are the things you're doing this week contributing to what you look like maybe in 3-5 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sometimes kind of figuring out. To be honest, professionally, I'm not exactly sure. I think graduate school opens up a lot of doors for you, especially then like environmental chemistry. You can go into a lot of different areas, but I don't know what specific area I kind of want to go to for that. There are things aspects of life that I need to focus more on, which is developing relationships with people and maintaining those. And that's something I want to work on towards a lot more. So 3 to 5 years, just be still in contact with a lot of the people that were really important to me in college, and maybe a lot of people that were still important to me in the graduate school. Okay. Working towards that. There are frivolous things like different climbing goals and athletic goals and stuff like that, which are important, but I mean that's not everything. Yeah. And so a lot of it's just still kind of teasing out, more just kind of focused on kind of what kind of person I want to be, rather than maybe specifically what career path that looks like. And it's something, I'm still just trying to kind of tease out. Which is a very vague answer, I realize, but it's the honest answer.
If we take that old metaphor of your life as a book, right now, what do you think your theme is right now? The overarching theme of your narrative right now?
Oh, it's for the past couple of years, it's the investment stage.
Investment?
Yep. Just putting effort towards a lot of things that don't have a lot of immediate reward. Whether that be graduate school, whether that be putting effort towards learning how to play the guitar and learning how to speak Spanish and learning how to salsa dance, and just kind of a lot of effort towards things that don't immediately pay off. That's what I'm saying.
Is the goal to have those one day pay? Like, what is the payoff? If it's not paying off now, that's under the condition that at some point it will pay off. And obviously, like, you get a current benefit of just going dancing and losing yourself in the music and stuff like that. But to me, that what you just said insinuates that there will be a time in the future where it has paid off. I don't know. Is there a time for you where it's like, oh, we're here in a sense?
That's a good point. It comes in spurts where, like, I'll take practicing guitar as an example. Like, you just spend so much time in your apartment just practicing guitar, and you have an opportunity to actually play, and then you do, and it goes well. And it's those kinds of moments that kind of pay off. Okay. And it kind of just builds on itself. And so, like, and this isn't just over the past maybe 2 or 3 years. It's been a lot more like, I'm going to invest in things that don't have immediate payoffs, because I find when they do pay off, like the TED Talk, like being in a band, like climbing, those things are much more fulfilling. So maybe like right now, like, sure, like things do have moments in which they pay off, but it's much more infrequent than if you just tried to do things that were just kind of just fun in the moment.
Yeah. Do you see yourself more in like a research domain? Like, have you thought about just like broad scale, like what area in life, like starting your own practice, or where do you see yourself in that sense?
I see myself being an educator in some capacity. Okay. So when I was, I taught general chemistry laboratory to 96 students this past year, and I loved it. It was so much fun. And it's those kind of interactions that I get a lot of fulfillment out of. And so I'm interested in like coaching cross country and doing those sorts of things. I find that the more interesting pathway. And so like right now, research is really frustrating, but I think eventually that could have the payoff in the sense of being an educator when you're making scientific discoveries and such that you can share with people and kind of spread the word about the things that you're learning about. And so I kind of see that. And I think also mentorship is really important to me too, for different mentors I've had. And then the impact I've seen when I, try to help other people. It's those kinds of stuff that I find very, very interesting. Yeah. So some sort of educative and mentorship position of some kind is something that I would find very fulfilling.
Yeah. Do you imagine how old the people you're teaching?
Honestly, I really like college age people because that's such a pivotal point in your life where, man, you go through so much growth in college. And so being a person that can kind of help foster and help promote that growth is really important. I feel like that'd be a fun age group to work with.
Yeah. Do you have an opinion on broad scale how colleges are set up right now? To me, they're very top heavy and there's not as much yield per dollar as they were in the past.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, they're super expensive now. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
I wonder why.
Oh, also just for sake of time, I'll probably have to head out just like a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, we can start to wrap up.
Yeah.
Okay. So a couple questions very quick, however you want to answer them. Is there any initiatives or anything that you want to promote and get the word out there? Anything you're personally doing or anything that you see and you really enjoy that you would like to broadcast?
That's very interesting. I think we've talked about the plant-based diet. That's something, but you can just watch.
Watch his TED Talk.
Just watch my
everybody.
TED Talk.
Yeah. It's like
just check that out.
11 minutes, I think.
Yeah, like 11,
good watch.
11, 12 minutes, something like that.
Yeah.
Seek constructive discomfort. Do things that initially seem discomfortable, but recognize that it's a good kind of discomfort. That's what happened when I salsa danced. I went salsa dancing. I was like, that was trash. I hated that so much. And I was like, wait a minute. Why did I hate that? I hated it because it was uncomfortable, but it wasn't a bad kind of uncomfortable. Like, I was like just dancing with people. It felt kind of weird, but like it wasn't like damaging to me. It wasn't hurting me or them in any way. So it really wasn't that discomfortable. Yeah. It made me like do something that I'm not familiar with, but it was dancing. It's not it's not going to hurt you. It's not that bad. And so I realized the reasons why I don't like this are not good enough reasons not to do it, versus the added benefit. And I stuck with it, and now it's really fun. I can just walk up to someone like, "Hey, you want to salsa dance?" And like, I'm not that good, but I can do it. And so recognize when you're in situations that are constructively discomfortable, and don't say like, "Oh, I'm not going to do that because I don't like that kind of stuff." When it's something that could be really cool. I experienced that with salsa dancing and climbing and playing guitar and doing that kind of stuff. So do that, and then. Oh my gosh, get your sleep. Sleep at least 7.5 hours, 8 hours a day. And then if you are able to get into running, that was the best decision I ever made.
Awesome.
Running's awesome.
Yeah. My screensaver right now is Instir Cleanus Invenitor, which is an alchemic saying for what you most want to find will be found where you least want to find it.
Yeah.
Which I love that right now. Yes. So in this little black journal right here, the previous person that was on the podcast wrote a question. They had no idea who was coming on.
Goodness gracious.
So it's been random every single time. Usually we talk about so many deep stuff that it's a pretty lighthearted question. Coming at you from Shamshir.
Okay, Shamshir, what you got?
What's the funniest joke that you know? On the spot, coming up with a joke.
Funniest joke I know. I don't think I know that many funny jokes like that where you can just pull out of your
Pulling out is
butt.
a hard one. Like it's a mean question almost.
Yeah.
You sit on it. You get to ask your own question. And if you want to think about those two things, if you have an answer to either, I would like your own question. If you have an answer to Sham's question, I can't come up with jokes on the spot. So I don't blame you, but that's if you would like to answer that. And while you think, my favorite question that we've gotten so far was, who should have actually been put down, Harambe or the parents?
Let's go back to high school.
Yeah,
days.
which I found hilarious, personally. But
that could be your answer for the funniest joke you can come up on the spot.
But if you have a question you'd like to propose, it can be deep or
propose to the next person.
Yeah, whoever's on next.
And ask the question: what was a redeeming experience of the pandemic for you?
Ooh.
Because I think we often think that sucked, and it did, but like, there could have been some good things that came from that.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah,
awesome. Jacob, do you want to? Is there anything else you want to promote, social medias or anything like that? Or
nah, I try not to have that big of a presence on there, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. All right, we're gonna end it right here, folks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.